It's very nice that viewers leave a lot of comments under my videos. I would like to thank you for sharing your views. Of course, there is a certain category of viewers whose intelligence is limited by insults. This is their problem. They don't even realize that they are insulting themselves. In the first place, by demonstrating their level of development. The theme of today's video is the nuclear war of the 19th century and the extinction of the giant race. I realized a long time ago that something is not quite right with this world, and in my spare time, I'm looking for answers to my accumulated questions. I create videos on these topics and upload them to my channel. In this video, I want to give some explanations about the giants in particular, about where and why they disappeared. Almost every major city in the world, which is more than 200 years old, has many buildings, the first floors of which are buried in the ground. There are quite a lot of such buildings in my city, and according to official data, some of them were built in the 19th century. Most people are satisfied with this version, and no one thinks about how, for example, a 2- or 3-story building could sink 2 to 3 meters into the ground in such a short time. Of course, official science always finds some kind of explanation, even if it is absurd. But nevertheless, an explanation. It could be groundwater, a cultural layer, and all this despite the fact that the older generation remembers these houses in exactly the same condition. And throughout their lives, these buildings have not changed at all. And no one buried them in the ground, and no cultural layer absorbed anyone, especially in Chicago, where the entire historical part of the city is located 1.5 to 2 meters below street level, and the arches of the houses are disproportionately low, allowing only light vehicles to enter. There is a lot of information and a lot of videos on this topic on the internet. At the moment, researchers are trying to reconstruct the true past of our Earth. There is a theory that information about a global war that supposedly occurred in the middle of the 19th century with the use of weapons comparable to nuclear weapons is hidden from the public. There is a lot of evidence, both indirect and direct, such as the rock in which the first floors of buildings are embedded. This is not a cultural layer, but usually ordinary clay, which got there either with water brought by a worldwide flood or fell from the sky. Almost the entire territory of the planet, including the USA, is replete with perfectly round craters of various depths. In arid regions, these craters are dry, which is logical, and in some places they have the shape of perfectly round lakes. There is a lot of information and a lot of videos on YouTube about this. Another piece of evidence is the almost complete absence of trees older than 150 years in the territories of the USA and the CIS. In rare exceptions, trees around 100 years old can be found. For example, the lifespan of an oak tree is up to 1,500 years. A pine and lime tree can live up to 400 years, and spruce and juniper up to 500 years. Also, in photographs from the late 18th to early 19th century, there are mostly shrubs, but now, in those same places, dense forests have grown. Additionally, on Google Maps, extensive forested areas with intersecting straight lines of unclear origin can be found, as if divided into cells of a standard size. This suggests that someone planted these areas with forests, and not just randomly but in even squares of the same size. For those interested, it's easy to find. You may be wondering what this has to do with giants. Well, there really is a connection. The internal pressure of each cell of our body, and not only ours but also animals, is about 6 to 7 atmospheres. In order not to burst from the inside and compensate for this pressure, we must constantly consume table salt. The lower the atmospheric pressure, the smaller the size of living organisms. For example, Japanese bonsai art involves growing miniature trees on a reduced scale. To grow a tree in miniature, it is covered with a glass cap, creating a reduced pressure inside. So, in order to equalize the internal pressure with the atmospheric pressure, the atmospheric pressure must be increased 6 to 7 times. In this case, the need for salt would disappear, but both trees and all living organisms would become several sizes larger. Consequently, just a few centuries ago, atmospheric pressure was higher, and people and animals were also larger. Pay attention to the fashion of the late 19th to early 20th century walking with a cane, regardless of age. If it was a trend in the early 20th century, in the 19th century, it was a necessity. This is because atmospheric pressure sharply dropped and people found it difficult to move. People and animals of our usual size survived because cooked salt helped solve this problem, while giants quickly became extinct. Why could atmospheric pressure drop so suddenly? In the 50s to 60s of the last century, the USSR and the USA conducted over 1,000 nuclear explosions as part of nuclear tests. In the 60s, 70s, a significant decrease in atmospheric pressure and a climate shift towards cooling were recorded worldwide compared to the previous decades. The older generation who lived through that time will confirm that winters were very harsh, taken for granted at the time. During the testing of the Tsar Bomba with a power of 20 megatons in 1961, the nuclear reaction was so powerful that hydrogen from the atmosphere began to enter the reaction. It lasted about half an hour and created a huge hole in the atmosphere. This was a modified version of a 100 megaton hydrogen bomb, and scientists were afraid to test it again. Subsequently, scientists recorded a drop in atmospheric pressure and a climate shift, confirming the assumptions that this was a consequence of nuclear tests. In 1963, the USSR and the USA signed a ban on any nuclear tests. Annual tree rings also indicate a slowdown in tree growth associated with a drop in pressure and a cold snap in the 1960s. As I mentioned earlier, evidence of the use of weapons of mass destruction is easy to observe around the world. Artifacts such as the uniform architectural style around the world, buried cities, the age of trees, and so on help date them. For those who are interested, look around and you will find it. I will try to make videos about it as often as possible. In conclusion, we note that before the global catastrophe caused by nuclear or similar weapons on Earth, atmospheric pressure and humidity were much higher. There was a race of giants and the animal and plant world was much more diverse. The climate was milder and warmer, and a unified civilization flourished all over the world under centralized control. For reasons that we can only guess at, a global war broke out that destroyed this global empire. Personally, I doubt that it was an internal conflict, because to cause such enormous damage to the whole Earth is suicide. How to detonate a bomb in the next room? It is more likely that this war was started by external forces that were outside the Earth at that time, and subsequently gained control over the Earth and its peoples. Perhaps these are the same reptiles, and most likely, for them the current atmospheric pressure is more comfortable than the 6 to 7 atmospheres that were before. All the large fauna, including giant humans, simply could not continue to exist and quickly died out. In addition, moisture from the atmosphere, which to some extent contributed to such high atmospheric pressure, fell in the form of snow and rain, thereby raising the level of the world's oceans. It is quite possible that this is why the world government is so afraid of global warming. If it gets warmer, moisture will evaporate like a sponge into the atmosphere, becoming warmer and wetter, and atmospheric pressure will rise. Then they won't be able to control us. They'll either have to stay in the aquarium, or leave the Earth, or arrange another disaster. Let's hope that nothing will work out for them and humanity will finally find freedom. My name is Professor Aristotle. See you on the channel.